Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, where positive parenting meets well-being. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Positively Healthy Mom. I'm your host, Laura Olinger, and today I've got Elaine Taylor-Klaus, who is the CEO and co-founder of ImpactParents.com. So, Elaine, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
First, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a mom of what I call three complex kids who are now young adults. My youngest is now 23, and my oldest is 30. I guess my daughter-in-law is in her mid-30s. And when I was a mom to young children, I was struggling a lot. I felt like there was a lot of support out there for kids and not a lot out there for parents. And the long story short is I discovered somebody coaching me, and I realized like it made all the difference in the world for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to school and became a certified coach, and I have been coaching parents of complex kids since 2009, I guess, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the differential is that I work predominantly with parents of what I call complex kids. So kids with who struggle with life, learning, behavior, emotion issues, social issues, often maybe diagnosed, maybe not, maybe with ADHD or autism, anxiety, learning disabilities, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so it was such a pleasant surprise when I realized that I own your book. Even before this podcast was scheduled, I've had this for a couple of years on my bookshelf, and it is such a wonderful resource. So what do you feel like was your goal or the purpose of writing this book?
So this is the second book that I've written, The Essential Guide to Raising Complex Kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it because, so if I go back, as I say, we've been coaching parents of complex kids for many years. And at some point, we realized that there was some fundamental training that parents were missing.
Mm.
In 2015, we created a program called Sanity School for Parents. And in that program, we teach uh, neurodiversity inclusive coaching skills to parents
Mm-hmm.
and professionals. And we started doing that in 2015. We started training professionals in 2017. And the first book, Parenting ADHD Now, came out in there somewhere. And it was a book of strategies, which is great. And yet it felt like it was still missing the foundation. And so the book is really a coach approach to parenting.
Mm.
And it really brings in foundational tools from the world of coaching, which is a change management kind of modality, and was really designed to be that foundation for any parent to try to get their head around what it means to raise kids who are struggling in some aspects of their lives,
Mm-hmm.
kids and young adults.
Yeah, so I love that term, the coach approach to parenting. It's something that I've learned about. I think I first learned about it through the Gottmans, Dr. John and Julie Gottman. And so I've adopted that with my profession, with what I do. And so to explain the coach approach to parenting to our audience, how would you describe that?
Well, so Gottman is a piece of it for sure. In the emotion management, trigger regulation kinds of issues we teach, we use a lot of Gottman's modality. The coach approach. So coaching is a method of change management that's very established. It's well documented. It's well researched. It's fairly new compared to therapy, and it's been around, I don't know, 30 to 50 years, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about the coach approach, we actually teach coaching tools, skills, and concepts to parents, because coaching, it's kind of a way of communicating differently. It's an empowerment based approach to helping people create change. And what do we want for parents more than anything is to empower our kids to see the possibility and create change for themselves. And so coaching becomes this really effective way, not coaching per se, but taking a coach approach, because I want parents to continue to be their kids' parents.
Right.
But if you can have these tools in your toolbox as a parent, when your kid's dealing with something and you have the capacity to say, what do you need from me right now?
Mm.
and to be able to meet them where they are, which is a key coaching concept, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so maybe that's supporting them with guidance, but maybe it's supporting them with more coach-like approach, more collaboratively, guiding them through their process of problem solving instead of that tendency parents have to kind of try to fix it for them or solve for them. We
Mhm.
want to enroll our kids in solving for themselves, and coaching is a great vehicle for us to learn to do that.
Yes, yes, I
We
completely.
look at parenting as a daily process of letting go. Coaching is the coach approach helps you do that in a really constructive way that keeps relationships strong.
Yes, yes, I'm loving the way you're putting this out there, because what comes up for me is just the idea of asking questions instead of telling. And I think so many parents are just in the mode because from when they're little, we're in that time where we're trying to get them out the door and get the shoes on, and right, we end up tell, put your shoes on, right, instead of what do you need to do today to make sure you get out the door on time, right? Like coming up with the organic question in the moment that suits them, but it empowers them. Does that resonate with you?
Totally. There's actually a section in the book that you were just holding up called Ask, Don't Tell. And in our framework, what we've begun to see is that there are kind of four phases that parents go through in parenting. And it's not linear, it's not a direct line. It's not like, okay, I'm out of phase one and I'm into phase two. It kind of depends on what your kid needs. But what you're describing is that tendency we parents have to start with directing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's reasonable and appropriate to be a director when our kids are little.
Mm-hmm.
The game is to move out of director and into collaborator as
Mm-hmm.
soon as we can. And that's kind of phase two. And then when we can, to move out of collaborator and into supporter. And most of the work of parenting, of really effective parenting, happens in that space between collaboration and support. When we can stop directing them, we can actually begin to collaborate with them and help them start directing themselves. And then we to move into support role.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And while we're at it, what's the fourth phase?
Fourth phase is what we champion. Most of us want to be there way before our kids are ready. And that's when they come to us for sage counsel and advice and wisdom. And we would like them to be doing that at 15, but really typically we're not doing most of our champion parenting till our kids are probably out of the house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
beyond that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing that came up for me as you were talking is one of the key coaching concepts is to always view your client with positive regard and having this positivity bias. And I think that's where a lot of parents struggle as well, where we're so caught up in our daily grind that we kind of get into our own negative, and then we might view our child's behaviors as negative, especially complex children. And it can really just drag the whole system down. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's not a parenting program out there in the world that doesn't have a positivity component, right?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm.
positive parenting is effective. Which is to understand that positive parenting doesn't just mean being nice,
Right.
right? Positive parenting is about creating an environment that really sets our kids up for success, that plays to their strengths, that sees their capacity, helps them see it for themselves. I find, particularly in working with parents of, again, what I call complex kids, is that parenting is really powerful, and taking a strength based approach is super important for these kids. It's also not enough. It's not enough. Like I went through in the early years, I went through a lot of those programs where, whether it's Nurture Card or some of those other 1, 2, 3 Magic, where you want to bring positivity and love, and you want to be able to set appropriate boundaries and all of that good stuff. And it is good stuff. And we also have to begin to understand how to set expectations that are appropriate to where our kids are, because I think where we end up struggling, and we have a whole module on positivity, but we also have a whole module on uh, setting expectations or shifting
Mhm.
expectations.
Yeah.
I think where we get stuck is we look at our kids and we say, well, you're 14, you should be able to X. You're
Mhm.
16, you should be able to.
Mhm.
And really, we need to look at our kids individually and say, okay, you're 14 and developmentally, that means you can do this. But in this area, you're still struggling and you may be developmentally more 14 going on 12. So we may need to adapt and meet you there right
Yeah.
now. That
Mhm.
doesn't, not going to get there, but we want to set the hurdles in a way that's attainable for them so they can get the success, because the success breeds more success. So we want to give them opportunities to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
that they can build on that and feel good about that and want to keep trying.
Yes. And I like that, because what came to mind was also comparison. I think parents, and I catch myself doing it myself, where it's crazy that my 12-year-old is fully capable of A, B, and C, but yet my 15-year-old can't,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. Right. And so then parents say, well, how is it that your younger sibling can do it, but you can't? Right. And so then we spiral down, and then it's a disaster. And right.
Right.
And so, I think just like seeing them as individuals and where they are, and see their strengths and kind of coach on that. And what else? Like, what else as far as
Can I
the,
just say something else to that point?
yeah.
Development is not a straight line.
Mm,
Right? Kids develop in lots of different arenas and lots of different areas, and they may be kind of growing in one area, but the other area, which you think they should be able to do, they're not focusing on that right now. They're focusing on something else. And sometimes if they're really focusing on one area, another area may actually fall back a little bit for a little while. Development, it's not linear. It's all happening at once. And so the game as a parent is to kind of figure out, where do they need me to step in, and where they need me to pull back, and to do it in a collaborative way where we're working together as a team, and we're not building resentments on either side.
that's great. Okay, so where does the dealing with like what you call the complex kids? What are, what is the message, or what is the helpful tips that you could give to the moms that are listening today that has to do with, because it is a wide range that you describe complex kids, like what would be some just general advice besides like, okay, so I'm going to take this coach approach. It's like, well, and what, like, what else is there?
Well, there's a lot. I would say there's a lot within the coach approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huge range within it. One of the really profound things that I think we parents can do to help set our kids up for success, regardless of what's going on with those kids, is to create an environment that makes it okay to make mistakes,
Mm.
and to challenge and manage our own perfectionism, to empower them to step out of perfectionism. A lot of our kids begin to model our perfectionism, and it's not always the healthiest thing that they model. So to create an environment where making mistakes is okay, where we understand that people learn from mistakes, that
Mm.
our kids see that that's how people learn and grow and change, and that it's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about making every mistake a new one, right? Learning from it and adapting to it. So that's, I think, one huge construct that parents can bring to parenting, is to really create a opportunity, an environment where kids can feel safe failing forward
Mm.
and feel safe asking for help. A lot of times our kids really resist asking for help, particularly tweens and teens,
Mm-hmm.
even into young adults. And if they're resisting accepting help, there are usually a few things going on. It's either usually that they're not ready for it, or that they don't want to need it, or that it's maybe not being offered in a way that's really feeling empowering to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
We say, I put this system in place and they won't use it. Well, that's because they haven't been part of creating it.
Yes.
And so we want to really invite them to ask for and accept help. And one of the most powerful ways we can do that is by modeling it for them and
Mm.
showing them the ways that we ask for help and accept help and invite help. And when we don't beat ourselves up for needing help, or don't try to do it all ourselves, that straps mentality doesn't always work well with kids who are already struggling with other things. We want to send them the message that sometimes people struggle with things, and that's okay, and we can't do it all ourselves. What I say is to parents a lot is, I don't cut my own hair, I don't do my own taxes. There are all kinds of things I ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, as I've done more and more coaching, I've gotten better and better at asking for help. And as a result, my kids don't resent always the need for help.
Mm.
Younger kids are better at asking for help than my older kid, who
Mm-hmm.
was older when I started doing this work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the more they can learn that the better the success they'll have in their lives.
Yes. It's so funny. I have a story from when I was a little girl. We were at Disney World and I was getting off the monorail and my mom wanted to hold my hand. But because I was I think I was two, I didn't want her help. I wanted to get off by myself because I was perfectly capable of walking off by myself. Well, of course, it's like 5 o'clock and everybody's rushing off to get ready for dinner. And she was afraid I was going to get trampled. So she grabs my hand and kind of pulls me off the monorail. And I just lay down on the ground screaming bloody murder because I was humiliated and I was insulted. And I felt just such anger that she didn't see me as capable. So it's this funny story because in my head, I've always labeled myself because I think I even said me do it. And so I've labeled myself as the me do it girl, where I hate having to ask for help. I don't like it, especially from my parents, because I'm like, they didn't see me as this capable person. And so it's like, modeling those, mistakes or the need for help. It just like, hey, we all need this, right? Like we all need a hand held getting off the monorail when it's really busy, even if you're 2 or if you're 20, right? Like let's be together. So yeah, I think that's such an important idea, and I think really probably very much needed for the mom.
No question. Well, and I was talking to one of my daughters the other day. My middle kid is 27, is in med school, is studying for an exam, and we were talking about this very issue because I was raised in a very perfectionist home where there were things I didn't do because I would rather not do them than do them wrong.
Mm,
And my eldest at 16 said those words to me almost exactly. Don't you see, Mom, if I haven't done it, I haven't done it wrong. Part
wow.
of what happens when we get too afraid to accept help is that we get kids who are going to avoid doing things that are healthy or fun or good for them or whatever because they would rather not do it than do it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
know, and here I am at 60 years old taking an art class for the first time in my life because finally I'm okay with maybe not being that good at it.
Mm,
I think it'll be fun. And for a
yeah.
lot of years I avoided it because I wasn't going to be good enough.
Mm. Yeah. So what an exciting new time for you where you're opening up these new possibilities, because art can never really be wrong, right? Like there is no wrong. And so yeah, just like building on that skill of like, oh, maybe this isn't great, but I'm proud of it. I love it. This is my creation, whatever kind of comes to your mind. And so that is really awesome.
And with 2 young adult kids now going, "Way to go, mom. Good job." Like they're now encouraging me in it because they get that that's okay
Mm,
not to be
mhm.
good at it.
Yeah, yeah. I love this. So, as a parenting coach, one of the things I see a lot of is parents struggling to set boundaries with, the kids who are getting their first phone or getting their first video game system. And it's all this stuff with the technology and not setting boundaries. And I see some people who are very, rigid, where, okay, it's out of the bedroom and we have screen time and it has to charge here and this and this and this and this and this. And I think that's great for the families that works for. And that doesn't fit every personality. So like, what are your just general thoughts off the top of your head of like a system that would be helpful for the personality, the parent who doesn't have those structures in place, but still want to have some boundaries?
Well, and so it's interesting. Lately, I've been making a distinction between boundaries and limits. And boundaries are what we put in place for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Limits are what we as parents might put on our kids.
Mm.
And so the distinction first I'll say is that what I'm hearing you saying is what are some appropriate, how do parents put limits
Mm.
devices and on kids' use of technology in a way that's not going to create pushback and resentment. And I think the most important part is to go back to that concept of collaborative and collaborative problem solving. I think as parents, we have to identify what are our basics, what are our foundations, what are the pieces beyond which. If I'm a parent that's just not going to let it in the bedroom, or it's got to go off at 11 o'clock or whatever it is, know what your boundaries are first as a parent. But then you get into a conversation with your kids and ask them, what do they think are appropriate limits for them?
Mm.
What are before you get to making the decision, listen to them, hear why they think it's appropriate. And then you can come back and you can have a conversation, almost a negotiation with them
Hmm.
around establishing clear limits that everybody agrees to. Then you've got their buy-in, you've got their engagement, you've got their ownership. And then you get to let and you want to, when you set a limit, you also want to have clear expectations that are agreed upon about what will happen if the limit is broken, if the
Hmm.
right? How do you want me to handle it when it's 11 o'clock, it's time for the device to go off, and you're saying 1 more minute, 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes? What do you think I should do? And so you're not just getting them to buy into the limit, but also to the consequence.
Hmm.
The beauty of that, Laura, is that when we get on the same team with our kids, then the system becomes the bad guy. And we
Right.
get to be able to stay in relationship with them. Man, I'm so sorry. I know this is not this it really stinks that you have to lose your technology for, or it really stinks whatever the consequence was that you agreed to.
Hmm.
Now you get to be on the team with them instead of the enforcer. And I think as parents, if we can stay out of the role of enforcer, particularly with preteens and teens,
Mm.
right? If we can stop thinking that we're the enforcer and start helping them take responsibility for the accountability that they have,
Hmm.
then we get to stay in relationship with them and we keep building trust.
Mm.
That's foundational, because otherwise you're going to get sneaky behaviors, you're going to get avoidance behaviors, you're going to get defensive or oppositional, all of those other behaviors you don't want.
Hmm.
You'll get when your kids don't feel like you've trusted them and that they can trust you.
Mm, yeah. I think that everything that you just said was just brilliant and genius and spot on and can apply not to just technology, but really any limits. And I love the distinction with boundaries and limits. I think that's really helpful with any in any context. You know, if it's driving and going out with friends or whatever it might be, but to kind of collaborate and decide that together and then agree upon the consequence in advance. And it was funny, I do a lot of, and I saw in your book too, there's a lot of just like brain health and brain science. And the human brain, was originally just to built and kind of developed so that we could survive. And it's also developed to conserve energy. And so if you think about it, it's 11 p.m. at night, everybody's exhausted. And that's when like things start to deteriorate because both brains, the teenager and the parent, they're trying to conserve energy. And so that's when like these eruptions can happen. Whereas if you even could say, hey, let's not have an 11 o'clock conversation. Let's talk about this, when we're going to have this conversation at noon on a Sunday and we're feeling well rested and we're well fed and we can have this plan together. That way we won't be tired. We won't have these fights or whatever happens, when we're exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that means at 11 o'clock saying, I get that you don't see it my way, and right now is not the best time to have this conversation. So for now, we're going to do this. I hear that you're not happy with it. I'm listening to you, and here's when. So we want to make sure that they know when that issue is going to come back, where
Yeah.
they're going to be listened to. And so if you haven't done it in advance, you can close it off in those moments of upset by acknowledging what their experience is. I get that this is not the outcome you want tonight, and I'm really sorry that you're so disappointed. And I don't blame you. I would be if I were you too. And right now, we've got to stop. We're going to pick this up tomorrow. We can talk about it during the day tomorrow when both of us are fresh. Right now, we're too tired. It's
Mm-hmm.
a great example of how we can acknowledge them and still hold our boundary,
Mm-hmm.
right? In order to get back to the place where you can reevaluate or reconsider the limit with them.
Yes, and then do any repair work if needed. Then, right? If there was any damage done to the relationship, we can repair it at that time, or repair in the moment, and then maybe repair again.
Well,
Um,
the acknowledgement is the beginning of the repair,
okay.
right? And so as
Mhm.
soon as you acknowledge what they're going through, if as soon as we say, this isn't that important, why are you getting so upset?
Yeah.
You should be grateful. Like as soon as we say anything that dismisses how they're feeling,
Mm,
we've lost a lot of credibility and trust.
Mm-hmm.
If we can start by acknowledging, I get this is so frustrating for you, annoying for you, you're pissed at me, whatever it is, I get it, and that's real. If we can acknowledge their feeling as real,
Mm-hmm.
so much trust for our capacity to be able to problem solve moving forward.
Mm, yes, that's so true. And it sounds so easy, and it's not always easy because some,
So,
we get triggered. And one of the best little tips I ever heard was from a parenting expert years ago. She said, when your kids are little, or you were little and you got a balloon at a birthday party or the grocery store or something, and inevitably, you let go and it floats up in the sky and the child is just distraught and on the ground. She said, imagine if that's your cell phone and your wallet flying up in the sky. How upset would you be? And that just shifted everything for me right there. I thought, oh, now I know how to put myself in my child's shoes. Now I know, because that's what it means to them, right? That's how important
right.
it is to them.
Well, and what you're saying, and the most important part, I think, of what you're saying is that they're humans, right? They're humans having their own experience, their own feelings, their own relationship with whatever the dynamic is. And once you get into kids who are preteens and teens and older, like they're not 3-year-olds who are so malleable to your wishes. Like they have their whole job at that age is to individuate and separate and to have their own goals and dreams and visions. They're now more motivated by pleasing themselves than they are about pleasing you.
Mm-hmm.
And while we may not want to hear that, developmentally, that's appropriate for them,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so we've got to acknowledge what you wouldn't just go into your best friend and take away their phone. You'd have a conversation. And
Right.
we need to recognize that our kids are separate, independent, autonomous human beings and treat them that way.
Mm-hmm.
Not to give up our authority, but that's to show respect for their individuality.
I love that. That's wonderful. Elaine, what else, is there anything else? I feel like this was a really powerful conversation. I feel like we covered a lot. Is there anything else that you're like, oh, I just have to share this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered a lot, and at the end of the day, like there's a lot of alignment in what I'm hearing you say, and the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
That's that who we are and how we be as parents really matters.
Mm.
And it's more important how we be in relationship with our kids than what we do. And
Mm.
and I think that sometimes as parents we get stuck in that hamster wheel of doing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything you can do to shift the dynamic, it's to recognize that your kids are separate into being independent beings, and your primary goal is to really be in relationship with them.
Mm.
Understand them well enough to help them understand themselves.
Mm.
That's they'll learn to manage themselves.
Mm. Beautiful. That's beautifully said. I love it. So, where can people find you going forward?
Well, so we have a robust website at impactparents.com. And if you go to impactparents.com/podcast, you can get to we have a Parenting with Impact podcast, and all kinds of resources, free downloads, hundreds and hundreds of blogs dating back to 2011. So there's a lot of really, really amazing resource and information on the website.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Elaine, so much for your time. I, again, was so honored to have you on my show, and thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Mhm.